dealing with the topics of this session, education, but I'm going to talk about my field of research, which is more 18th century German Jewish history, and I hope to convince you that it is relevant to our issue. So the question of how to be Jewish in 21st century became, for me, last year, a most personal and practical question. I was greatly honored by winning the Humboldt Research Award, and I was invited to spend half a year in Frankfurt. I had then to navigate my way through the challenges of daily life, but also had the chance to observe the life of the new Jewish communities there, especially in Frankfurt, but also in a few other places in Germany. So what I really wanted to look and to understand was the education, the media, religious life, and even politics. But above all, as an historian of the Jews in Germany in the 18th century, then only half the size of the current Jewish communities, I was keep asking myself, is there any continuity between the early project of Jewish culture and educational modernization back then and the present experience? At the beginning, my answer was entirely negative. There is no way to see in the new communities any resemblance to the past. This is entirely new phenomenon. But gradually, after a month or so, I realized that I'm wrong. The main achievements of my 18th century protagonists could at least challenge Jewish life, education, and leadership in Germany today. And this is the topic of our session this afternoon here in Tel Aviv. So allow me to take you back to the old times, when the Jewish society started to experience secularization, and when the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah, emerged as a program for re-educating the Jews. The Haskalah had an extraordinary transformative power, despite its limited scope. We're not talking about many people who were involved in this project. This was true in the 18th century, when an internal cultural and social regeneration was on the agenda, and even more so in the 19th century, when it embraced the program of improving the life of Jews as citizens in their state and cooperated with governmental initiatives for integration of the Jews, but that happened mainly in the 19th century in the Russian Empire. In Germany, we cannot talk about Jewish enlightenment in the 19th century anymore. I don't want here to go into the complex issue of defining secularization, but even in the basic definition, which points to the weakened presence of religion in the life of individual and the society, and the weakened strength of the religious leadership, one can view the Haskalah project as a revolution that made a decisive contribution to secularization, and one whose implications for shaping modern Jewish life endure to this day. Of all the paths to modernization in the 18th century, the Haskalah was, in my view, the most significant gate through which Jews entered into modern era. It was the movement that first upset the sensitive nerves of modernity and triggered the Kulturkampf between Jewish modernists and their opponents. And I believe that this is also relevant to the present day. I would like to shed some light on the major invention of the Haskalah, the modern intellectual elite. Throughout the 18th century, beginning with the early Haskalah, a new society of writers emerged that challenged the monopoly of the religious elite over knowledge and spiritual guidance. The poet, the journalist, the doctor, the philosopher, differed from the rabbi or the preacher. The conflict between the groups marked one of the many boundary lines that divided modern Jewry. Most members of the new elite did not revolt against religious faith and practice, but they introduced into Jewish society a new voice, humanistic and liberal values, and most important, a demand for spiritual leadership, which was not based on religion alone. This unprecedented invention, a precondition to my mind for every other modern invention, was in fact the invention of the maskil, the new type of modern Jewish intellectual, to whom I devoted my book, The Jewish Enlightenment. One of the characteristics of the secularization of Europe was, as we all know, a change in the decision-making process. The elites who drew their authority from a supernatural source gradually lost their role as decision-makers to elites who drew their authority from human experience and reason. The secularizing meaning of the 18th century Enlightenment was manifested in the fact that the theologians were removed from key positions in the world of knowledge and study, and that literature, for example, became autonomous and free of religious considerations or religious authority. A similar process took place in the Jewish society. The Maskilim were the first secular intellectuals in the role as the bearer of universal knowledge about nature and man. In the resolve to nurture rationalist Jewish thought, in the objection to superstition, and in the project to re-educate, to revive Jewish culture through periodicals, poetry, literature, and the establishment of a new Jewish library, in all this, the emergence of a modern secular Jewish intellectual elite, as we still know it today, was evident. As the independent identity of the new elite and its power as an attractive alternative became more clearly defined, its opponent in the traditional elite began to realize that it was subverting its foundations and undermining the existing order. It was this move which aroused so much suspicion and fear on the part of the traditional elite at the stage when it was becoming what we understand today as orthodox, that ignited the cultural conflict, the Kulturkampf. Even moderate maskilic proposals to establish new schools where children could study secular subjects were then considered heretic. In historical perspective, the small group of maskilim, always a minority, and in some places even a persecuted minority, had unquestionably broken the religious elite's monopoly over knowledge and the guidance of the public. The other component of the project was modern Jewish education, another significant invention of the Jewish Enlightenment. The Freischule, which was opened in Berlin in 1778, was in fact the first to propose an educational framework outside of the traditional religious institutions. The modern educational program proposed by the Maskilim encompassed the educational modernization project of the Haskalah, and its revolutionary nature was evident. The struggle of the rabbis against, for example, Naftali Herz-Vezeli, the guy who published the first essay ever on modern Jewish education, was passionate and fervent. This brief open letter, 1782, by Vezeli, contained the genetic material of the Maskilic secularization project. Here the writer, the secular intellectual, the poet, took the position of the public critic of traditional society, and he proposed what is called in Hebrew Haseder HaNachon, the right order of education. He took advantage of the open letter to encourage public opinion in support of his program and assumed the role of a leader trying to persuade his audience of the urgent need for drastic educational reform. His main argument was that it would no longer be possible to base one's identity on Jewish particularity and religion alone. It was necessary to add the civil identity and the universal identity of the citizen and the Jew as a human being. It is here that the Haskalah project of secularization finds its strongest expression. The Jew was called upon to no longer limit the Jewish identity to the sphere of the religion and knowledge that derived from revelation, and instead to expand it to encompass human existence beyond Judaism. The very desire of the masculine to control education is revolutionary and, as I said before, subversive. The schools of the masculine would become a focus of unceasing debate. If secularization also means the replacement of religious contents, values, and institutions with non-religious counterparts, then the traditional cheder becomes chinuch ne'arim, secular knowledge is added to the curriculum, textbooks join the holy books, professionally trained teachers replace the melamdim. Now that I have presented these main points of the Haskalah secularization project, it would be appropriate to relate to Moses Mendelssohn, who is at the center of the discourse on the religious enlightenment of the Jews. Mendelssohn disliked atheism and was not a deist, but he saw all religions, including Judaism, as supplementing the natural religion which requires no revelation. He had no need of rabbinical authority to support him or to give him legitimacy, although he did enjoy the support of several rabbis. But the most profound secularization project that can be attributed to Mendelssohn was his uncompromising struggle against religious fanaticism. It is inescapably clear to anyone listening to Mendelssohn's voice in his writing and letters that he detested religious fanaticism and regarded it as the root of all evil in the past and the present. He welcomed every sign that religious tolerance was growing and rejected all manifestations of religious fanaticism, in particular the forced imposition of halachic norms on anyone defined as a deviant by the rabbis. He therefore demanded that the religious leadership be denied the right to impose excommunication, cherem, and called upon the rabbis to willingly give up this right. He believed that this religious and social weapon expressed the psychology of the persecuted Jew, who in the same fashion oppresses those Jews who are under his control. In this instance, Mendelssohn is revealed as a Jewish liberal and humanist. Religious tolerance was his most significant contribution to the modernization and secularization project of the Jews. The important inventions of the Haskalah, tolerance, secular intellectual, modern education, and even the revival of the Hebrew language, all those inventions became the building blocks of modern Jewish culture from then to the present day. The public space was totally changed, and the new players who entered it led Jewish society to an enormous transformation. It did not take long before the secular intellectual became the dominant type. Writers and scholars created modern Jewish culture in Hebrew and in European languages, unrelated to the patterns of rabbinical culture. Nearly every ideological movement after the Haskalah was marked by the recognition of an historical shift and a call upon its followers to adopt innovative initiatives. Institutions of modern education became widespread. And most important of all, the boundaries that the masculine were the first to draw between the supporters of the Jewish project of modernization and its critics became the front line of the Jewish kulturka. And back to the 21st century. In my short stay in Germany, I realized that there is an urgent need to remember this past experience. This crucial chapter in Jewish history should be told in order to give the new Jews of Germany not just a better understanding of the past, but also in order to develop tolerant, liberal Jewish life and in order not to give up to the wish of ultra-Orthodox leaders and teachers to use the weakness of the German Jews. The first modern intellectuals in the 18th century taught us how wrong it is to assume that Orthodox rabbis are the only ones who could serve as the gatekeepers of Judaism and as those who know better how to maintain Jewish identity. We are now in the state of Israel at the midst of a crucial struggle on the question of authority and source of inspiration. The liberal and democratic values or the Orthodox religious norms. This question should be also engaged and discussed among the Jews in the diaspora, Germany included. The Kulturkampf is still relevant there even today. Thank you. This is my brief presentation. And now I'm coming back to my original, actually, job as the chair of this session. And I'm happy to introduce the first presenter, Professor Rabbi Walter Homolka. He's rector of the Abraham Geiger Rabbinical College and professor of Jewish Studies at the University of Potsdam. And is the former chief area rabbi of Lower Saxony and a vice president of the European Union for Progressive Judaism. He's also a chairman of the Leo Beck Foundation and the Ernst Ludwig Herrlich Scholarship Foundation. And today he's going to talk about educating a new generation of German Jewish leadership. Please.
Good afternoon. My first attempt will be to get my PowerPoint up, so we'll see whether I have enough secular knowledge together with my religious expertise to fill you in with what I am going to say. So we need the desktop and then find another desktop. Maybe this. The red one is here. Oh. Don't save. Ah, here it is. This one. No, this one. This one? Yeah. Perfect. Great. I know how to handle it. Thank you. Here we are. Well, I couldn't have a better introduction, really, than Shmuel Feiner's words, because, as a matter of fact, what I'm going to tell you about are two projects that I'm involved in here in Germany. That is the creation of a rabbinical seminary as a part of a state university, and also a scholarship foundation for Jewish students that combines the urge for academic excellence and Jewish involvement. And therefore, I'm actually talking about how best we think we can develop professionals, both lay and religious, in order to be to have a future for our Jewish communities. And I think a look into the past is really quite helpful, because I tend to believe the insight is still true that education in the German sense of Bildung is and has always been the key to Jewish survival. And the best way to integrate the next generation into the project of Judaism. And that has been said yesterday, and I want to confirm that. But As Shmuel Feiner rightly pointed out, since the 18th century, we do not live on a religious island anymore, but there is, thanks to Haskalah, the appreciation of various areas of knowledge, and that also resulted in a situation of counter-virtualization between the religious knowledge and the secular methods and information. For religious training, for rabbinic training, this resulted in Abraham Geiger's demand of 1836 that the emancipation will only be complete when rabbis will be trained within a university framework and thereby combine the religious sphere with the sphere of the secular methods. As a result, the Jewish Theological Seminary was founded in Breslau in the 1850s, and later the Hochschule für die Wissenschaft des Judentums was added in Berlin in 1872. Both aspired to academic standards, but the doors of the German university system at the time were firmly shut. During the Nazi period, in 1938 and 1942 respectively, both institutions had to close, and also the Orthodox Hildesheimer Seminary was destroyed. And nobody thought that Germany would ever need a rabbinical training center anymore after the Shoah. But then in 1989, the wall came down and 200,000 immigrants flooded the fading German Jewish community. And all of a sudden, Jewish professionals were in great demand to build pluralistic Judaism in today's more than 130 Jewish communities. Now, if you remember what Michael Wolfson has said rather critically, one can always argue whether the glass is half empty or half full. Obviously, we decided that we need to get going and need to do something about it and create institutions that help people who have changed countries and who have an uncertain or certainly have questions about their Jewish identity, to give them a framework in which to pursue these questions. One of these was the Abraham Geiger College, an adjunct institute of Potsdam University, which we founded in 1999. And here you see pictures 12 years later at an ordination in the Jewish community of Bamberg, where you see not only the chairman of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, he did come to that one, I have to say, even if he didn't come to Tel Aviv, together with a female rabbi that has been ordained together here in Bamberg. The first ordination was not in 2011, but in 2006. I show you this picture because in this service, the chairman of the Central Council of Jews in Germany confirmed that it is important to produce rabbis made in Germany, and that he hoped that many more, he even spoke of hundreds of rabbis, would come from Germany and also would be exported into the rest of Europe. I think that's a very courageous remark to make if you think that we were really not quite sure whether Judaism in Germany would ever again make a real contribution to European Jewry. So in 1999 we founded the Abraham Geiger College. It is the first academic seminary for rabbis and cantors in continental Europe after the Shoah. It stands in the tradition of the Berlin Hochschule für die Wissenschaft des Judentums. And as you can see, it is has become rather a large organization. We started with a budget of around 30,000 euro. Now this is a 1.5 million euro endeavor, and I will shortly tell you about the most recent developments, because as you can imagine, an adjunct institution is not a university institution. It is adjacent to a university, and therefore is not the fulfillment of what Abraham Geiger dreamed about. But still, I would say it is an interesting beginning. The institution, okay, I was afraid that that wasn't working. It draws from private and public sources, mainly the federal German government, the Standing Conference of the Ministers of Education and Cultural Affairs of the Länder in the Federal Republic of Germany, the Federal State of Brandenburg, as well as the Central Council of Jews in Germany and the Leo Baeck Foundation. Why do I say this? Because you can see from this structure of funding that it has been possible to develop a non-orthodox institution with the Central Council of Jews in Germany that usually held the opinion that only orthodoxy is the authoritative interpretation of a religion, and over the years has learned, also thanks to some court cases in constitutional court, that there are various streams of Judaism, and that the survival of Judaism depends on supporting all the various angles, be they secular or religious, in order to keep the Jewish people afloat. And therefore, I think it is interesting that we reached in Germany a situation where this institution is largely government funded, which also means that in 2008, when most of the rabbinical seminaries had a very bad time due to the financial crisis, we had our best year, because if you're supported by the government, especially the German government, I'm not so sure about the Greek government, you are in safe hands. The first ordination took place in, oh, well, that's an interesting chart. It only shows you, if you can see that, there is a very small yellow line down at the bottom, and there is this red line. You see the development of the funding of the government for the Central Council of Jews in Germany. That's the red line, and it is at about, it goes into 5 million, and the development of the funding for rabbinical training. So one can say that really the official sources, Jewish authorities, don't spend very much on religious training. And I think that's just interesting to note. Dresden 2006 was the first ordination since 1942, a new synagogue, 3 new rabbis. One of the rabbis has become very well known. The one on the left side, Daniel Alter, is the one whose jaw has been broken a couple of months ago due to an attack in Berlin. The rabbi in the middle is Marco Mattitiani. He is now rabbi in Cape Town, and the fellow on the right side is the rabbi in Munich. The mission of the Abraham Geiger College is to train male and female rabbis, as well as male and female cantors, since 2007 for Jewish communities all over Central and Eastern Europe, and particularly for Germany. The academic education is integrated into the extensive curriculum of the Institute for Jewish Studies at Potsdam University, where people have to get an MA in Jewish Studies, and is embedded in the broad context of this state university in order to also foster the understanding of Judaism in a pluralistic context. Currently we have 11 cantorial students, 17 rabbinical students, and you can see that the countries of origin are quite diverse. FSU, Israel, Hungary, France, Serbia, Poland, Sweden, Norway, South Africa, Argentina. I think this diverse background of students supports the development of the aspirants by regular evaluation of the improvement of the single segments of the training. Each student has a mentor. But what I think is most important is that rabbinic training in Germany, thanks to being at a German university, is tuition free, and therefore we can educate rabbis for all those countries who couldn't afford sending somebody to North America, where training is about $150,000 per person. And it was quite clear from the beginning that this would not be a European solution. This is why we have candidates from all over, and especially from Eastern Europe. I think that's the only training institution that congregations can afford. And I think that was one of the important steps that we wanted to create, that there is no financial barrier to getting this education. The education of Abraham Geiger College is based on 3 pillars. Number 1, the high academic standards with a broad selection of courses in Potsdam leading to a master's degree. Then the support of the students during their practical training by expert psychological monitoring, and the guidance of the students in their pastoral practice through experienced rabbis in the field. As a consequence of our efforts, this training has been accredited by the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which was a second important component, because it meant that the training becomes internationally viable, and that with that kind of ordination, any candidate can find a position in the most important market for non-Orthodox Judaism, which is North America. And that, of course, this accreditation makes this education both unique and very worthwhile, because without that, the most important area for jobs would have been closed. Although it's not our intention to train for North America, I think it is still important that we have the same standards as America has. We have a pretty nice environment in which we operate. In 2008, we were offered a building on the campus of Potsdam University, and this is the building, the yellow building on the lower side of the picture. It's actually not, 6.3 million is the renovation costs, which is covered by the German government, and it's the gatehouse of the former imperial palace where William II lived until the monarchy was abolished in 1918. So it's a pretty nice campus. The bachelor and the master program comprise 3 modules: Jewish religion and philosophy, Jewish history, as well as Jewish literature and culture. Furthermore, language acquisition is demanded. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Yiddish are learned intensively at Potsdam University. The Jewish studies curriculum at Potsdam University deals with many sensitive areas of the education of rabbis and is intensively coordinated with us. Therefore, we can speak of a happy cooperation. Potsdam University has developed a nationally and internationally reputed high-profile area in Jewish studies, and that has recently been upgraded with the Center for Jewish Studies Berlin-Brandenburg, and one of the main masterminds for this sits among us. It's Professor Schöps. We have created a Jewish Studies Center together with the help of the Federal Education Ministry that has a budget of some 7 million euro a year to upgrade the Jewish Studies program in the area of Berlin-Brandenburg, and some of this goes also into religious training here at the Abraham Geiger College. I think it is important to note that we have achieved a new quality of training recently with the initiative to start a Jewish theology department. And as a matter of fact, on March 19th, we will unveil this new Institute for Jewish Theology. And that means that we will merge with the university and finally become what Abraham Geiger has demanded, a part of the university system, and therefore we will have equal status to the Christian theology departments. Well, what does this mean? It first of all means 5 chairs in Jewish theology, from Bible to history, from philosophy to Jewish music, tenured positions with research assistants, a fully fledged institute that is paid for by the government. It means for me, for example, that my fundraising goal diminishes largely from what has been 90% of the budget to maybe 5 or 10%. I think we already have a contract with Tel Aviv University. I'm not so sure, but I think that's there. But that is, of course, a totally new quality, because it also means that now we will have Jewish professors who are civil servants teaching these subjects, particularly from a religious perspective. And as much as I cherish Jewish studies and Judaic, Hebraic studies, I think a philological or a cultural approach is fine, but has to, especially for rabbis and cantors, has to have a religious perspective as well. And therefore, we are actually seeing, I think, the creation of a new subject. Internships in Germany are varied, so our students already work in the congregation while they study, free of charge, so that these congregations actually benefit from our students even before their investiture or ordination. They also go worldwide, from Los Angeles to Paris, from Luxembourg to Cape Town. And if you look at where we place our students, I think that is a success story. So one can say that within 10, 15 years of our formation, we have created a training institution that is internationally accepted, that can place its students successfully worldwide, and that offers training free of charge. One aspect was missing. Not only should we train tuition free, we found, but also we would have to find money for living expenses, because most people from Eastern Europe, even if they get training free of charge, they need to live off something while they study. And that led to a second project, which you will find at the bottom of this chart. That's the Ernst Ludwig Ehrlich Scholarship Fund. And that's even more interesting for all of those of you who do not necessarily want to enter the rabbinate, but who nevertheless want to make a contribution to the Jewish scene. The Ernst Ludwig Ehrlich Scholarship Fund is an institution that is, again, funded by the German government. It is one of 12 institutions that give scholarship to particularly gifted students. There exist funds like this for the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the trade unions, all kinds of groups in society. Is it me? No. So it was only consequential to say, why isn't there such a scholarship fund for the Jewish community? And the current Federal Minister of Education, Annette Schavan, has been very helpful in setting this up and thereby bridging the old tradition of Jewish thinkers and people who made an impact in their fields with the present. And at the moment, we have about 300 students who receive a scholarship. Actually, some of them are here. Wave, yes, exactly. Hello. The idea is that if you are selected, you first of all have brilliant marks in your high school diploma, but you also have shown interest in engaging in the Jewish community. The fund is run pluralistic. This means there's not a liberal fund, not a reform fund, not a conservative fund, not an orthodox fund. It is actually run in a way that everybody can participate. There are orthodox rabbis and mentors as well as non-orthodox ones. We have programs that tackle the whole variety of Jewish life. The benefits of being a student are obvious, especially if you look at the fact that if you have a growth, if you have 200,000 immigrants, the first generation of these immigrants is very likely to land or to exist from social benefits. Not very many people could go into the professions that they had previously held, and therefore a lot of the academics who came were then parking lot assistants or whatever else. It means that they had not a lot of money to invest into the education of their children. And here this fund becomes instrumental because based on your income tax, students can get up to something like 750 euro per month, non-repayable scholarship in the basic support system, and over 1,000 euro if you are writing your PhD. On top of that, every month, and that's irrespective of parental income, 150 euro for books. And I can say to those who are members of this scholarship scheme that as of today, the German government has raised this to 300 euro per month. This means a scholarship plus 300 euro per month for books is a very comfortable situation for any student. Eligible are Jewish students who are German citizens or hold a European Union citizenship, and here again it becomes interesting because that is true for Poland, for Romania, for all kinds of countries with a very unstable Jewish structure, and if those young people decide to study at a German university, they can get a scholarship like this. I think we also have a special clause for Israelis so that they are part of this program. The government spends on this program alone, I think something like 3.5 million euro. The only stipulation is that we spend a good part of it for the immersion of our scholarship recipients into the Jewish world. This means that we offer a number of summer experiences, programs, seminars, whatever, even 6 weeks in Israel, working in old age homes and trying to get a grip on the Israeli society. All of this is targeted at giving these people an inspiration to engage in the Jewish life. And I think that is, even looking at it from a general point of view, that is even more important than the rabbinical training. Because who will employ rabbis? Only open-minded chairmen or representatives of Jewish communities who think it is necessary to spend the money on a rabbi. And therefore this investment in young professionals, in the best of their various fields to excel in their academic studies, but also to keep them engaged in Jewish life and to present them with all kinds of varieties of Jewish life is an important factor in the rejuvenation of German Jewish communities. Scholarships for doctoral candidates are provided for up to 3 years. I'm giving you here a couple of pictures of the varied life, of the varied experiences that we have. You can see that this is ranging from Chabad to secular debates. We are happy to say that we also give an award, and the incoming new federal education minister has already received the Ernst Ludwig Ehrlich Scholarship Medal for Sciences and Arts. So I can assume that even now that the minister changes on Thursday, we are still doing okay. I've talked about the figures already. As I said, the pillar is the intellectual development program. That is something that I enjoy very much organizing, and the activities range from communal Shabbatot to group meetings, to regional meetings, to seminars, and long-range experiences such as the year in Israel. Yeah, interesting for you maybe to see who is getting scholarships. The light blue part of the cake, that's university. The dark blue is applied science organizations, and the very light blue is doctoral students. So we have 70 doctoral students currently in our support system, 154 university students and 28 students at a higher educational institution of applied sciences. Male and female is almost equal. The academic fields, we have a huge focus on the humanities and the economics. Law and engineering. Engineering is very low, but that's a fact nowadays. We will try to also recruit more technical people, but apparently that is a challenge. Interesting is, and that, well, probably quite obvious is, that most of our scholarship holders have a migration background. That's also important because that has something to do with the funding. But since these are all second-generation immigrants, clearly we also get predominantly students whose parents have an immigration background. And therefore that makes us top of the list for the funding, because although this scheme is more directed towards Turks or other immigrants, the fact that we are a migration community is also represented here. And it also represented in the statistics. From which countries do our students come? And apart from Germany, this is Russia, the Ukraine, Israel, 26 students from Israel, Latvia, USA, France, Austria, Georgia, Italy, Kazakhstan, Moldova, Belarus, Brazil, Estonia, Lithuania, Norway, Paraguay, Slovenia, South Africa, Tajikistan, Uruguay, and Venezuela. I mean, that looks like a Jewish institution, doesn't it? And thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you.